Okay, so here we are on Cherry Valley Road. We're going to go take a look at Cherry Valley Falls today. So, I'm going to do something a little different today, too. I'm going to try starting a new channel. I've been recording hikes for a little bit now. Just more in the lines of showing people what's going on. But I've got a lot of things on my mind, so I'm going to use this as an hour to talk things through in my own head. I'll try to be fair and representative to all topics. But if you guys enjoy it, let me know. So, I apologize for any nasty video. I'll keep things respectful. But it's going to be very raw, kind of uncut, maybe even a little borderline Blair Witch style. I do have a gimbal here to try to keep you guys from getting sick. But hey, the other thing I wanted to show real quick, just so this is the parking area, and just so if you are coming out here, want to come out and do a hike, there's not a lot of parking. So I would say come early. You can see where that white car is on the left. You can park down pretty much. There's only about 2 spots here on the right. I mean, that's the premier parking. But let's go on out. I've been here once before, a long time ago. Basically, this is a trail that's mostly logging roads to start. And then it breaks off down by the trail. So let's go. It's a couple miles out. You hear the birds going this morning. It's kind of nice. It's chilly. 7 a.m. Just so that while I'm chattering, I'm not going to be annoying a bunch of people too. Just the birds. Well, so lots of things going on. I don't want to use this as a session just to bitch and cry about things. But there's definitely a lot of big news going on right now. So this is actually, in case you guys don't know, and if this stays around for a while, this is 2022, near the start of March, and I think it's March 6th, but don't quote me on it. I'm really not paying much attention. It's a Sunday morning. But we just have the big thing in the news right now is Russia has invaded Ukraine for the last 2-3 weeks. And it's starting to get really serious. I have a friend that I work with, and his parents still live in Ukraine. They're in the outskirts, in a little city that doesn't seem to have a lot of action going on, which is good for him. But wow, I'm already out of breath. Half the reason I'm doing this stuff is to get my fat ass out more. Actually, that's the whole reason. Don't let me lie to you. But anyways, so his family's doing good, but through, we just came through this pandemic too, or we're on the outskirts of it. So I've learned a lot recently that the narratives, or when I say narratives, that's a code word that's used now for what the common populace believes about a certain subject. And it seems like, while portions or most of it may be true, there's significant things that are ignored when they don't fit that. And so it seems like lately today, in these days, we've been losing the art of discussion. And I think part of that may be because we're home so much. I know a lot of people are working from home, and I hate the way we already use terms like working class or, you know, white collar workers, blue collar workers. But there is kind of, I would say, divisions of thought. And I think it's because everybody's got their own position, but ultimately, we're a lot more similar than everybody else. I mean, then people would, I mean, our similarities are greater than our differences. And that's a real problem. So this is my attempt to talk this through. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about it. Whew. Talking and walking, who would have thought this could be such a pain in the ass? You can hear somebody's rooster, or could even be like a peacock off in the distance. Yeah, so let's go back. Sorry, I got some ADD going on, and it takes me off down weird tangents. Back to the Ukraine-Russia war. So they're calling it a hot war. A lot of people are concerned about World War III. I definitely am too. But let's go on to, I'm going to try to, I would like to call these facts, but they're truly not facts. They're anecdotal information I've gotten best through my friend. That's one source. So I got to qualify that right out front. So many of us these days are not honest about where we get the sources of our information. Because our information might come from something that we tend to think is true, and so therefore it is true because it matches what we want to hear. If we can be honest about the potential of something to be true or not, that's part of it. But the other part is, I don't want to say truth is truth, because truth can mean different things to different people depending on your viewpoint. And I've really come to understand that lately too. And ultimately, that truth, one person's truth isn't more important or less important than another person's truth because of because of a person's baseline assumptions that they make around that truth. And I'll get more, I think that will really come into play later on if I get down into the whole to COVID or not to COVID, which is, the COVID idiots who love, who think it's all bullshit and not real, or the sheeple, I'm using derogatory terms, who are so scared and will follow anything in between, and if you don't have 5 masks on, you're killing everybody. So it's neither of those, but we'll talk more about that later. Back to the war. See, ADD catching in again. Sorry, got you off track. Hope I didn't just get anybody sick there. Okay. So Ukraine. God, this is going to be hell on the chapters when I go and edit this about the subject matter. So my friend, so first off, let's timeline this just a little bit. I'm going to start off with, the invasion happened. Everything is going in. Real quick, when I was looking at most of the media, and I got to be careful how I define the media, because media can take all forms. And I know this is a little bit of a divergence from the war, but I think this is critical. You got people like me giving their opinion, and it's going, oh, I forgot how much of a hill this thing is at the start. You got people like me who are giving their opinion and just a perspective on things. That can be on YouTube, Facebook, any of the platforms that are cheap and easy to get onto. And I would honestly, even though I would love to say that I am super insightful, we're the lowest rung. Our fidelity around fact checking is generally pretty small, is not very good. I want you to, anything I say, go out and double check it. I'll try to put some links in where it's relevant, where it's easily relevant, but the war stuff is largely anecdotal for me. But anyways, so you could call it mainstream media or the next media, I guess, would be independents. These are smaller groups that sometimes they're impartial. Usually they're not. Actually, most media usually isn't. But they're generally a smaller, non-budget. They're not really owned. They're independent, just like it says, right? And they're a little better. The next media sources are up or are independents that generally kind of make it big. Maybe something like Vice or The Hill, things like that. And they're still good. I mean, I think all media tries to do what's best in their eyes for, this is a tough one, for their constituents. This is where things start getting muddy, right? When I say their constituents. It really depends on how money's being pulled in. As soon as money gets into a picture, the whole idea is just destroyed. Not the idea. As soon as money comes into any subject, oh look, we got a nice engraved sign up here saying falls this way. Kind of what I remember. There we go. But yeah, I think ultimately on a lot of our problems and challenges, and especially with the information bias, you can almost always find money being the root. And when you're trying to ferret out truth, what I do is I always try to look and see, okay, who's funding this particular narrative and who does it benefit, who makes money. And it doesn't mean it's not true, but it means you have to have a healthier dose of skepticism. And then, of course, the next one would be up. I was trying to think of a good name for them, and I think it is corporate media, because this ties into that whole cost of money, or the whole point behind money buying into it. How are they benefiting? So then comes corporate media. But anyways, okay, so coming back to media and the war. That's where we leapt off this track, this tangent. You have media that is saying one thing, and like I noticed it real quick in the war that all of a sudden they're recanting. Oh, there's the ghost of Kiev flying around. You know, he shot down like 12 planes in one day, which is crazy. You know, an ace is like 6 in a career. And that came out as being false. You know, there's even reports of video game footage being broadcast. Now, to be fair, that may not be the corporate media doing it. I don't think they screwed up that bad. But there was definitely, you know, little independents. I wouldn't even call them independents. They're not really, news isn't their thing. People like me putting that crap on Facebook. So, you got to be really careful. Okay, so I identified real quick that just like with some of the other things, there were some challenges. I'm just trying to aim us down. We're going back down a hill now. You can kind of see this has kind of been a nice sort of gradual walk. It's a road. It's actually drivable. I could drive on it with my car if I wanted to, or if I could get by the gates. But, okay. Let's get back to, I noticed there was a problem. So I reached out to a coworker I know at the company I work at. And I started asking him questions. And so this is where we'll get back in. You know, he said he has some cousins and his parents still live in Ukraine. And so, you know, first off, hey, how's your family doing? He says, oh yeah, everybody's fine. And, you know, they're still, he talks to them every day. And this was about a week into the war. He talks to them every day. There seems to be, oh, sorry, got sidetracked again. Let me get you back on track there. There we go. Now I can see the trail coming ahead. So he talks to them every day. And I'm trying to organize my thoughts because it's kind of crucial, these next pieces of information. So, yeah, there's a lot. Basically, he was establishing that, at least with his contacts in Ukraine, he had lots of communication. This isn't out of date, I guess is where I'm trying to go with this. But he said, so I asked, I said, hey, how's food going? Or is there like giant runs on the stores like there was at the start of the COVID pandemic here? And he's like, well, you get a little bit of that. But he said in poorer countries that, and I think this is more habit rather than calling Ukraine a poor country. But, you know, they're just a new country as of 20 years ago or whatever. And now their sovereignty is being threatened again. But he said that it's a common practice to store up for the winter, just like you would in old times, right? People work their ass off. They can a bunch of foods. They take perishables and make them non-perishable. You know, you don't just go down to the grocery store and get something. So you're taking fruits, canning them, meats, drying them, things like that. Making food to last the winter so you can survive. You know, kind of, actually, it's a true definition of prepping. And that's kind of where that comes from. You know, humans have a natural want to prep. Here, we're coming across the creek here. I want to say this is the Cherry Valley Creek, but you know what? I haven't looked at a map. I can't verify for sure. It's a cool bridge made out of an old railroad car here. Oh, we actually got two creeks coming together. I'll stop and show you guys here. Got the creek there, the main one, and there's actually a little offshoot valley coming in right here. They both come together underneath the bridge, and then they leave the bridge, let me get down so you can see it, as one. I always love the sound of water. Okay, so we were just talking about prepping for winter and how a lot of the poorer Eastern Bloc countries tend to be really good at that because you never know when craziness is going to happen and someone's going to try to invade your country and you won't have any freaking food. All right. So he said they're doing pretty good for food. And they got enough to survive a month or so, right, through the bad times. But what he did say, he said their biggest concern at that point was if fighting escalated and more bombing occurred, which now since actually has occurred, still not in their cities, but I digress here. Going back, they're concerned about window damage because as soon as your windows get damaged, then it's harder to stay warm. You know, so in the cold of winter, over in Russia, it's super cold. You know, talk about a tough people. But they're dealing with stuff that's a lot colder than we have in the States. I mean, makes this little 32-degree morning look ridiculous. And you can see, even though it's 32 degrees out, we still have flowing water on the trails. It's not like froze. That doesn't generally happen until we get down around 25. Anyways. Okay, so he said they were really concerned about windows being damaged and not being able to remain heated, remain warm. And I can understand how that would be a big concern. Sorry, I'm just stepping up above the rocks here. Okay, so this would be a little harder to drive, this part. And he also said that he used his comment that I thought was interesting. He said, this is a very weird war. And so I'm going to go on some of these first things that actually have now come out in corporate media and come to be true. I wonder if you can hear the disdain in my voice for corporate media. Lately, I've been very frustrated. Whether you're talking Fox, CNN, they're all a bunch of people that only fit their narrative. Won't say anything negative when it's against themselves or against their clients. So, where the fuck was I? Sorry. Yeah, that really struck a nerve with me. Kind of triggered me there talking about that. I hate non-transparency. Okay, yeah, so since then, this has kind of validated my source just a little bit. And I put more stock into it because I'm starting to see things that are coming more true. So he says weird war. All right. So what was weird about it is you got these lines and lines of tanks coming in from Russia. Now, the term tanks, I don't think this is really correct. They're really armored personnel carriers, you know, like these 8-wheeled assault vehicles. You might want to call them urban assault vehicles, but nonetheless, they're wheeled, they're not tracked. So you got lines and lines of these things, and they're, you know, funneling into Ukraine from all different borders. Well, most of the Russian army wasn't super familiar with the streets of Ukraine, and they'd be going around all over the place. Oh, here's another little detour. Not sure where that goes, but this is all, I mean, I don't know if you've seen I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit from the war discussion because this is what I do. I don't stay in one place. All these trees are almost all the same age. I bet this was logged in the 70s. Okay, so weird war. Armored personnel carriers coming into Russia. So they're all coming into Russia and all over the place. They're not familiar with the area. And he said that you'd see lots of them getting lost. And they would get out and talk to civilians and ask for directions on where to go. And so it was almost cordial, right? He also said that, you know, they would go into stores, into Ukraine stores, peacefully buy food and leave. No problem. They would talk to civilians and ask for supplies, pumping up air in a tire, you know, getting some motor oil, having problems with their vehicles. And what this leads to is there was no real support, like vehicles running out of fuel and breaking down and all kinds of stuff. So it seems like this wasn't a very strategic approach by the Russians to come in, and Putin. I hate that using that. I feel more comfortable saying Putin because I think he's the guy at the top. But Russians as a whole, I don't think this is necessarily their idea. We'll get onto that more later too. But I hate naming groups. So I'm going to twist you down here just a little bit. We're going back down. It's really kind of pretty back here, isn't it? Yeah, so these troops are going all over the place, and, you know, they're having trouble quote unquote, hitting their objectives. And I think basically what he said is they were only firing on people if they fired on first, right? Kind of a, okay, we're going to come in and take over your country, but in a non-forceful, we won't use force unless you resist, right? Kind of like the big kid saying, give me your lunch money, you won't get hurt as long as you give it to me, right? So at the base front, I don't want to change what's going on, because yeah, they're technically invading the country, right? It's like I think my analogy actually holds pretty fit. You know, it's like the bully saying, give me your lunch money. You give it to me, everything will be cool. We're going to go on our way. So it's a little bit of, I guess that would be extortion, right? Where do we go here? Well, it looks like it's more worn to the right. Oh, there's a sign up there on the right too. Okay, we're going back uphill. I'm going to put the gimbal back up a little bit. Boy, this thing doesn't do very fine adjustment motors. It's nice and smooth, but hard to center it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so, whoa. Am I running out of battery? That was weird. I was getting some hard shocks there. I don't know. We'll see how far we go. Maybe this is going to honk up and I'm going to have to come back out and do this stuff again. That sucks. Sorry about that. So, like I said, this is going to be raw and cut. I apologize for that. I was getting some weird little motions from the gimbal motor. Yeah, so basically it was a non-violent invasion to this point. And only being fired on, returning fire, basically. So he thought that was really interesting. It wasn't an aggressive kind of a, take in and beat everything down. So, I said, oh, that's really interesting. And, there would be, he said, oh, he also said that the army, the Russian military would go into police stations. And I gotta step over a mud puddle here. And they go into these police stations, have a discussion with the police, leave, no problems, no gunfire, everybody's happy. And so I also asked him, I was trying to understand more about the makeup of people. And I asked his position. I said, where are you on this? He says, I was born in the Ukraine. I'm definitely pro-Ukraine. He said, but I can't see, he said, even though I may not agree with it, I can understand the Putin point, or Putin's point about, if he was to, if Ukraine was to get into NATO, and all of a sudden he has a new set of, I don't know, missile launchers or something like that to deal with. I mean, quite frankly, here in the States, we'd probably have a big problem if Mexico sort of joined forces with one of our potential, I gotta hate this term, adversaries. I really don't want to look at China and Russia as adversary, but it's like kind of like Cuba back in the, whenever that was, back in the 60s, the John F. Kennedy days. We're worried about missiles going in right on our doorstep, right? So same kind of issue. I could see we would probably do a similar, well, I don't know, right? That's conjecture. See, I'm trying not to do it, but I could see how we may, or there would be a desire to do something like that. How about that? That's a fair statement. Oh, back down another hill. Okay. So basically, he was saying, even though I may not agree and be happy with the point, that he can at least understand the other side's objective. And I think that's the thing that we as a people, we as a society, don't do enough of. You don't have to agree with something, but you should try to have an understanding of and get kind of at least know where the other party's coming from, because that'll also help strengthen your own opinions, arguments, viewpoints, etc. Wow, we've been talking about Ukraine for a long time. I'm probably over a mile in. Yeah, so anyways, so that's where he's coming at it from, this whole thing. I said, oh, that's very interesting. So I reported this out. My dad was really interested. He had a church that wanted to start praying for the whole situation over there, because it is a terrible thing. Yeah, so anyways, so that occurred. I talked to him. That was all the information at that time. And, you know, the whole weird war thing was very interesting. Oh, yeah, and I asked him, I said, what's the, at that same point, see, I told you I was a little bit scattered. I'm trying to do all this from memory. I asked him about what was the, as far as population, how does the population feel about all this? And what's the breakdown of the population? He said, well, really you have two factions here. Now this is a lot of this is more common knowledge now that this is kind of in a hot point. But you got the Crimea area, which is kind of the south little peninsula thing. And then you have the east area, kind of the east border. There's like a couple areas, and they're predominantly Russian, and the same people, same religion, same everything. And this was on a later conversation. I'm going to bring this into it because I think now that we're talking about the difference here. But anyways, 80% Ukraine, 20% Russian. And when I say that, I'm talking that in terms of speaking, right? That's what they speak at home. Often you'll have families from other countries, they'll immigrate somewhere, and they'll keep their native language at home just because it's familiar to them. It's a sense of identity. You know, we have Spanish-speaking people here in U.S. that have immigrated from Mexico. My wife, she's Cambodian. She speaks a dialect of Chinese. It's kind of like it's called Dichu, but we'll talk about more like that maybe later. So anyways, you have this people, it's about 80-20, and it's the only difference between them, they're both Orthodox Christian, so there's no religious difference, but there's just this difference of language, basically. And maybe, and I don't think it's even political difference of not, you know, wishing Russia would come in and take Crimea, or, you know, these eastern sections. But there's a language difference. And so, you know, later on, as news went on, you kept hearing about Putin's coming in to take over the Nazis. And this term Nazis and nationalists were used together, you know, quite often. And so 20% Russian, 80% Ukraine speaking. And then I keep hearing things through different media channels, Nazis, corporate, you know, you'd even see little, some logos, you wouldn't see swastikas, but you'd see like the little SS stickers. So there's definitely something going on here. And so I wasn't just going to discount it, but I called my friend back up, and so I wanted to cover that side of it. And this was where I was really ignorant of it. And I'd kind of heard some stuff at the time, but, you know, typical U.S. people, if it doesn't, well, I don't know, typical people. If it doesn't impact us, we're going to push it out of our mind because we've got other stuff to think about. You know, not really worried about the plight of the world as a whole, which is, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Ah, geez, I'm really having a tough time trying to center this thing. Okay. And so I said, hey, what's the deal with the nationalists? Because here's another group name that bothered me. So, I'm your average American. Wow. I'm having some real problems here with, oh, I think I'm running out of juice. Ah, crap. Hang on, you're going to get a little sick here. I was getting a weird little FF thing. I'm going to have to look this up to see what's wrong with my gimbal. Might have to return this thing. I've had it for a month or so. So, we'll see how long we can keep going with this. Bear with me. Yeah, so I was having trouble with the term nationalists. And, well, we're going down a steep incline. So, the quote-unquote nationalists, I said, I'm from the U.S., consider myself a proud American, right? Proud USA kind of guy. And I said, I'm very proud of my country. Why wouldn't I be proud? Why wouldn't I want my nation to succeed? And he said, I think you fundamentally misunderstood the term of it and how it's used. And so there's some semantics going on here. Ultimately, nationalists are like, hey, it's all our nation. It's not necessarily race, right? Because this isn't about race. This isn't about religion. This isn't about race. This is about the nation of Ukraine. If you're in Ukraine, you speak Ukraine only. This is all Ukrainians or nothing, kind of like. And it's actually, there was persecution going on, just like the other, if you were racist, persecution going on towards people that didn't speak Ukraine. So if you kept your Russian language at home, you were actively persecuted. And this is something he then added on. He said, this happens, oh, nice little creek here. This happens outside of Russia too. So in Poland and Canada, there's still animosity and violence between Ukraine Russians and Ukrainians. Ukrainians, that sounded dumb. But there's still violence between these two groups. So in 2014, I guess they had an election, as I understand it, and this more nationalistic group managed to secure power. Whether it was legitimately secured it or not secured it, but I believe it was a democratic kind of a thing. And somehow they managed to get it. And so over the last, what did that be? 14 to 22, 8 years, there's been a lot of violence, or let's call it persecution. I think that's an appropriate term. Persecution done towards the Russian Ukrainians. And so that's what this whole war is about. Is this, well, all right, remember this is one source, right? Go out, verify this. This feeling of all Ukraine or nothing against this one people. So now, of course, we're seeing evidence of bombings and shellings of civilian apartments, and calls where the current Ukraine president, who this is harder, where might be influenced by this nationalistic group, some don't really know, has been calling for no-fly zones and everything, and trying to introduce people to get into this war. And so, shelling of apartments. This sounds like a very similar thing to what was going on with in the Middle East where you get insurgents and they would basically use civilian shields, where they would get some armaments from whatever faction was helping them supply or helping them create, funding their position, I guess you'd say. And so, anyways, I'm going to call them Ukraine nationalists, or the pro-Ukraine. Let's call it pro-Ukraine. I think that sounds better. Because I'm not for their persecution, and I'm not for this war either. But anyhow, so pro-Ukraine, because they're a smaller force, and this is where I can understand their tactic, is wanting to use, hide amongst civilians, because it makes, basically it increases collateral damage and puts the Russian military in a worse light. Yeah, it's really pretty now. Now we're back into some original forest. You can see this forest is a lot older. So they're hiding different missile batteries and fighting amongst these other civilian targets. And so there's places where now people are getting hit with cluster munitions and stuff, which is ugly stuff. And he said that now, quote unquote, the part of the 80% civilian population is kind of pissed at their military for hiding like that, right? I mean, but this is all back to self-interest, right? The pro-Ukraine doing the fighting, the pro-Ukraine military, they don't want to get blown up and, put themselves out in the middle of nowhere. They want to make it tough for the enemy. And the people, they don't want to get blown up. They don't want to be a shield. And quite frankly, the Russian military doesn't want to kill their brothers either. Some of them feel like they're brothers. Oh, yeah, so way back, he said there was a lot of reports of Russian military just putting on civilian clothes and leaving their tanks behind and just disappearing, going AWOL. But who knows? They could also have been disappearing and collecting intelligence too. So, could be anything. So that's kind of a challenge. And so it was interesting hearing what he said about this nationalistic group. One thing that he said that I thought that really kind of struck me as odd, he said, this nationalistic group, the last thing you want, and he didn't really specify this, but he was implying this, just because I've known him for a long time. He said, you wouldn't want to get one of these, if the West saw what these people are like, he said, you get a drunk Ukrainian as a neighbor, and you'd be a lot less supportive of him, which I thought was kind of an interesting statement. So he was saying that, he's not hot on their tactics either. So it's kind of it's a whole complex kind of shitty situation. So I thought that was very fascinating. Gotta go down a hill here a little bit. A little twisty. I'll try to keep you focused on the main trail. All right. Well, it looks like we're still recording, 43 minutes into this thing. That would have sucked if I was talking this whole time for nothing. But if anything else, right? I'm not trying to... I don't want you guys just to listen to me unless you enjoy it. It's more for me too. Yeah, so back to it. So he said, yeah, there's a real problem with this nationalistic kind of approach. And it's, kind of going back to my original point of what's the difference between pride in your country and nationalism. This is like, hey, no immigration, no speaking other languages. I mean, and I think most people in the U.S. would be tolerant of that hate, because there's benefits of immigration and benefits of, having a diverse culture. I mean, how many people love Mexican food? Personally, not my favorite. I'm more of an Asian food kind of guy. But this diversity is something that's cool. I think it's important. Yeah, so back to the Ukraine again. He was talking about how a lot of the drunk Ukrainians aren't, excuse me, God, I just labeled an entire group. If you get one of the nationalists that happens to be drunk and next to you, not such a great person. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then I also asked him a little bit about at that point in time, there was this big fight, shelling, not so much air support, but shelling for going on for trying to take the last kind of big nuclear power station. And there's a lot of concern about it going off. And basically at that point he said, yeah, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. They're going to, the Russian army will successfully take it. And he said, me personally kind of think that's a good thing. Because the last thing you want is a desperate military group, meaning the pro-Ukraine military, having control of that and purposefully setting it off. He said he wouldn't put it past them, which would be a terrible thing, right? Kind of a scorched earth deal. If I can't have it, nobody can. Which would be terrible for the populace. So I thought that was kind of an interesting viewpoint as well. All right. So now we've spent 40 minutes talking about the Ukraine and getting all through it. I'm still waiting to see what finally happens with it. I hope minimal amount of bloodshed can be had. I hope people stay safe as possible. I just can't imagine what it's like. We talked about some other things. So this kind of all started off. This was a big topic, but the next big topic. Let's see if we can choose let me pick a funner thing to talk about. It doesn't have to all be these shit topics, even though that's what's always on people's mind. All right, here's a good. Well, would that be a good segue? Okay, I promise. Let's see. Let's talk about something positive. So, things that can be positive. I've been thinking lately, I do work for a living, but I have a small business as well. And I've been thinking about kind of changing that. The small business is it's struggling big time. My thoughts are it's not going to succeed. Me and a partner do it. I kind of finance it, and my partner does all the work. He works his ass off, and his wife does too. So they put all the effort into it. I really don't put any effort. I put money when it's needed, but that's it. But I think that at some point we may have to pull a plug on it and figure out what to do. But so I've been thinking about other things, and one of my challenges, I've been getting to be a bigger and a bigger guy, right? I topped off at my biggest weight here a little bit ago. Got on the scale and I was 222.4 pounds, heaviest I've ever been. So I said, I need to get my ass out and start walking. I hate running. I'm not a treadmill guy. I hate that. I would much rather be out here doing this. So I started doing this and just recording some video, just because I thought it'd be something just to kind of document. And I haven't put anything up on YouTube, but after today's topic, I think I'm going to put a couple things up on YouTube, and we'll just see how it takes off. Maybe this definitely isn't going to make big big cash by any means. But it's something kind of fun to play with, something for me to learn about. And give me a chance to share the Northwest. I love living here, even though it rains all the time, and even looking today, it's kind of gloomy. But, you know, there's some neat place. I got to find a good place to jump across. There's a couple rocks there I can use. You step on these rocks. If I squeal, you know I went in. Oh, safely done. Let's climb up this little trail here. So as you can see, the trail's gotten a little more ugly. Yeah, so anyways, I was trying to think on other things to do. So I got stuck on this thing, kind of sustainable farming lately. And I thought it was kind of an interesting idea. And you know, right now, agri-farming is a real big thing, or agri-farming, monoculture farming. So they'll grow one thing. Billions of cows. Just slipped. Hey, this gimbal did pretty good. Hasn't acted up too much. Maybe we're going to be good. Billions of cows, billions of chickens. You know, my heart goes out when I see these animals raised in such a terrible situation. And I'm not vegan, and I'm not anti-eating animals. I am minimizing pain, though. I think suffering is, I'm anti-suffering. And so this kind of goes back to when, you know, how can you make the animal's life as good as possible? You hear about, you know, the favorite thing is Costco chickens, and, you know, you see some pretty horrendous things. This chicken that can't stand up or something. And the only thing I want to, this kind of goes back to this narrative thing. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. And I definitely don't like the situation. But now we're in another gory topic again. Oh well, let's take it where it leads us. So, when you see these chickens, the one thing I do see in the background, which I don't see people giving credit to, is there's, for every one chicken that's crippled, deformed, problem, there's 100 chickens behind them, maybe more, that seem to be okay. Now, I'm going to quantify that big time, right? Okay is a relative thing. I still would not enjoy being crammed in to a barn with a whole bunch of other people, right? That's why I'm out here in Washington rather than in New York City. Nothing wrong with New York. There's a lot of bonuses when you're in the city. The advantage is there's a lot of diversity that you get that you may not get out here. So, but yes, so you do have a, God, these are terrible terms, because people have a tendency to equate animals with humans, and the term culling, I get an immediate aversion to it, because I keep thinking, oh, well, you know, that's basically what, you know, back to Nazis, that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to cull the world of what they thought was the inferior race. And so the term culling has a real aversion. But at the same time, I mean, we kind of do this with, where does, it's very hard to take a unilateral line on this. I mean, we breed animals all the time for desirable traits. I've got a dog that's a purebred dog. And it's, so a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, which is actually a mutt of a bunch of it. It's not as purebred as some of them, but I guess all of them are a little bit different. Anyways, all I'm trying to say is that very often we breed for traits in livestock, in our pets, in our plants, in our roses, flowers. We genetically modify lots of stuff. And sometimes it's through natural means like selection, and sometimes it's through less natural means like insemination or something. Here, I'm trying to set this up. I'm going down a pretty steep hill here, so make it so that actually this is a very steep hill. I'm kind of surprised that this is the trail. This isn't very good trail building. It's probably a 30% grade. Let me go back up here. And we're all twisted and honked up now. Okay, better. A little mud bottom here. Where am I going to go across? Let's pick across those. Wow, I think this battery is going dead, because it's really lagging. Well, as long as it keeps up and keeps you guys more or less stable. Sorry about that. Balancing. Okay, I made it. Okay. Yeah, so I got to somehow have this balanced thought on natural selection versus this balanced thought on willing to how do you deal with the unlucky few animals that you're raising for food, for protein. I mean, let's be honest, we're raising these to eat, and how do we give them the best life possible without causing undue pain just for the sake of dollar, right? The whole reason why there's these massive things is, okay, you pump it full of antibiotics and all this shit, and that increases the profit margin. Everybody loves money. I love money, right? I understand the capitalistic nature behind it. I may not be happy with the conditions it creates, but I understand it. But this kind of goes back to my first statement earlier, follow the money. You look at the lobbying behind animal cruelty laws, and I find it appalling that animal cruelty laws, the exception is birds. And I am pretty sure that that's lobbying by the poultry farmers lobby. But anyways, you see a lot of little farms that are managing, free range kind of things, and free range chickens and things like that. And I was like, I would love to maybe give this a shot. I'm not a hunter. I can't stand killing things. I watched a YouTube video on butchering a chicken the other day, and I actually cried. Right? Taking life is not fun, but I eat meat. I get it. This is part of it. Oh, that's cool. Little robin just flew away. Snuck on her. Okay, we have a decision to make. What's the best way to get through this mess? It looks like a lot of people, some people go straight forward, go right through the heart of it, across a couple logs and stuff. But, I'm going to be a little different. I'm going to go around the outside. I also see tracks out here, too. So much in life is about contemplating the best way forward before you do it, right? And, of course, we end up in a shithole. How am I going to get across this? Okay, I see my way. I'm going to step here. This is going to be wonderful video, guys. I'm going to step on this slick-ass log. Oh, God, I know I'm going to regret this. This is going to be funny as hell. Oh, dude. Don't celebrate yet. Fall down as soon as I celebrate. Okay. I'm going to jump over to this little spot right here. Success. And my gimbal's all honked up. Here, let me see if I can get it back straight. Okay, it's on a crooked. Got to twist it back to the... There we go. Hey, that worked pretty good. Okay. So back to... Whoa! Stumble. What are we talking about? Oh yeah, sustainable farming. Yeah, so yes, it's butchering chickens. That was it. Yeah, so I cried watching how to butcher chickens. It looked pretty simple. You know, I'd have to watch it a few more times. But there's this guy, Joe Salatin, and he had a statement. I'm gonna see if I can remember what it was. But it was something to the lines of, it was a play on the word sacrilege. And this is, I think it was sanctity and sacrilege. And it was, he was talking about how if you have chickens, you want this animal, ultimately, it's giving up its life so that we, meaning people, can gain protein from it. Oh, well, here's something I didn't plan on. Oh, it looks like there's an answer over here, though. Here's going to be another sketchy thing. All right, hey, you guys are learning something. If you come out here, maybe wear deep boots, because it looks like people, in the summer, this is probably low enough. But in the winter time, somebody was nice enough to put up a makeshift bridge with a rope. And it looks like there's enough mud on this. Hopefully that's sandy and not slippery. It doesn't feel too bad. There's a real rope and there's a paracord line here. Okay, so you guys get to see if, oh, you kind of got to lean to the right a little bit. One-handed, no balancing. The rope here really is helping me a lot. Hey, that worked not too bad. All right, whoever put that up, I'm gonna give you a big thank you right now, bottom of my heart. Wonderful. Now I just got to climb off this without skewing my butt on one of these knots. Ugh. Oh, another little. Oh, I see what it was. I lightly clicked the. No, this thing isn't screwing up. Operator error. So there's this trigger on the front side of my gimbal. And when I rest against it, it freaks it out. So it's my dumbass usage. All right. Yeah. So many things in life you find out you blame on somebody else or something else, and it's really your own dumb fault. Anyways, boy, I can really hear. I wonder if we're close to the falls. I hear something going on here. Oh yeah, we are. I'm blown away. There was a couple cars out there, yet I haven't run into anybody. So I'm going to put a temporary hold. A lot of mud here. I'm going to walk around this way. I'm going to put a temporary hold on chickens right now. And let's focus on the waterfall. Oh, it's going pretty good. Last time I was here, it was just a trickle. I'm going to set this camera up on a tripod and just take some roll of this footage. This is pretty cool. I'm really enjoying this. I'm glad I came out today. It's a little gloomy, but I can deal with that. Okay, let's get this spec straight. Okay, I'm going to zoom it in the shot here. A little bit up. This is so hard to keep this centered. The problem is my yaw. Damn it. Let's go over here. I'm gonna set this up on this log. Just didn't look right. I'm going to try something here. Let's see if we can keep this centered. Yeah, I think this will work. Perfect. God. Sorry about that. I'm learning how to use this too. Okay guys, that was kind of a nice break. Let's head on back. We're an hour into this whole discussion. Got to see a pretty cool waterfall. It's really going pretty good. Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about farming, sustainable farming, chickens. Oh yeah, I was crying while watching a chicken being butchered. So I was trying to think on how we could sustainably farm something. Wow, look at this. There's a secondary trail going around up to the right. Let's see where this goes. Does it go farther? Oh, it goes up above the falls. You know what? I'm going to head back. We're going to make that's going to be more for another time. let's save that for later. So anyway, sustainable farming, butchering chickens. This might be something I want to try. Now, I'm not doing it to make any money. It's more along the lines of, I think our food supply, I'm not going to say it's tainted, because there's obvious benefits from, you know, massive amounts of you know, vitamins, and the big problem is using antibiotics, right? And you look at now, you know, look, I'm one dude again. We're going to talk about sources. And okay, back across this scary log. It wasn't scary on the way up. Now we're going to go down, slight downhill. We'll go nice and easy so I don't slip and fall in the creek and break my arm, something dumb. Okay, nice and easy. Yeah, so I think that there's some challenges with too much manipulating with medicine. Now, when I use the term medicine, I'm not as concerned about vitamins as I'm concerned about antibiotics. Because anytime you get a bunch of crowded, whether it's people, coronavirus spreads, or, you know, animals together in one place, diseases spread, just fact. Gives more of one type, any kind of monoculture, all of the same thing, you get disease spread. So, I mean, you look in the trees around here right now, we have all kinds of diversity around amongst the trees. That makes it unlikely. So if a pathogen hits any one of these entities, and it happens to, for example, we got a cedar tree right on the left right there, western red cedar. If a bug comes on that tends to do really well in western red cedars, they're a little ways apart, so you might have a clump of them right here, but there's not another one real close, so it just spreads real quick. So therefore, it's good to have diversity. Likewise, with you look at breeds of animals, whether you're talking farming breeds or, you know, pets, you get all the same breed of animal, and it's going to have some problems too. Oh, look at this. Talk about learning curve. I'm getting smarter, doing things smarter. Hopefully this continues to be smarter. I'm going to make my own road here. Look at that. Oh, I'm seeing some evidence that I'm not the first person to think that was a good idea. Thanks for going on that wild ride there. Anyways, yeah, diversity is a good thing because it's like, what would you want to call it? Immunity through diversity? Resistance through diversity. That's what it is, resistance. So you get a natural resistance for different pathogens. So there's this guy online, and he's actually been touting this stuff, I think, for several decades. Guy's name's Joe Salat, and he's got this farm, this organization called Polyface Farms, and he's basically doing small base farming, and most of his stuff, he really focuses on livestock, not so much on what do you call it when you're growing stuff? I don't know. He doesn't grow shit. And there's some benefit. I got to tie my shoe, so I'm going to put you down. Let's find a good place. Look at our beautiful northwest forest. I heard a comment once by somebody talking about how in the northwest here, the trees are like Q-tips. I thought that was kind of a funny way of looking at it. But, you know, thinking back to my travels around the state, and other than jungles, it's really kind of true. I mean, you can't see more than, in the Northwest Forest, you typically can't see more than 100 yards. I mean, I wouldn't know if a cougar or bear was right next to me. But you go to like the East Coast and Virginia and some of the other Tennessee forests, oh, you could see miles ahead because the forest is so thin, especially with the deciduous trees. So, anyways, I think that I would like to maybe try playing with, raising some livestock. And just, I was thinking about it a little bit. So much of our life is, there's little fees for everything. And the fees are because the item that you're doing is convenience. Whether you're talking about, hey, instead of composting, oh, hey, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Excuse us.
No problem, no problem. You guys have a wonderful day. First people on the trail. Yeah, so, lost my train of thought again. Yeah, so the fees, small fees, we got little fees for garbage, little fees for composting, little fees for recycle. And I would love, maybe part of it was I didn't have as much money. Now we're in that steep section again. I didn't have as much money before, but I would love to start reducing some of those fees. And I've seen a lot of stuff that it doesn't take a lot of land to do some of this. And, it was this Joe guy, he had an interesting statement. And I don't know, I think it would be sustainable too. But he talked about every household should have 2 or 3 chickens, hens, egg layers, because you get a twofold out of it. Number one, you don't need a garbage disposal anymore. They eat all your stuff, and whatever they don't eat, I mean, you got to be a little bit smart about it. Some stuff's not healthy for chickens. Well, but I think I'd be in the more mind of just, all right, feed it to them. If they eat it, that's good. The only thing that I was doing some research on is people were talking about, you don't want to get them used to eating eggshells, because they start associating that with the eggs and they'll start eating their own eggs. Because I want to eat the eggs, right? So you got to grind them up or smash them up so they're not recognizable. Well, it looks like we have another group of people. So I thought that would be kind of a good thing. Hello?
Hi.
What group are you with? You all have the same hats.
We went for a run last week to Las Vegas.
A run to Las Vegas? Well, very cool.
Yeah.
Hey, have a good day. That's another thing. I was just thinking about this. So many people. Another great sign of diversity. Obviously, English isn't necessarily their first language, but friendly people. And so many people today don't stop and say hi and ask an interesting question about somebody else, because people love it when you take interest in them. That would help this world a lot too. So going back, if everybody had a chicken, you get some eggs, and chickens aren't exactly hard to raise. And roosters are annoying as hell. Don't get a rooster. Make sure you get the chicken. And do 2 or 3 chickens. And so I live out here in kind of Woodinville. It's called Woodinville up over here in Washington. And, they're not super loud and annoying. I got neighbors that have chickens. and they're fine. You know, no louder than a child or somebody's dog. But you do have to watch out with, like, we've got wild animals that would love to snack on a chicken. So that could be different. Oh, hey, how you guys doing?
Good, you?
Now we're starting to hit the crowd. So, hey, there's the sign that, so I got to the trailhead at 7:30 this morning. I know it sounds early on a Sunday, but it was nice to be able to have all the freedom to talk and do this based on thoughts. Okay. You know, I said I wanted to cover something kind of fun, and so that was my thought is that this sustainable farming on a small scale can be done by people with minor inconvenience. And my first thought is the real problem, just like with pets, is you got to get somebody to take care of your livestock if you go somewhere. That's my only negative that I have right now. I'm trying to think on, all right, how do you do that? And there's probably, I mean, that's kind of where I think community comes into play. You bring, community can come in and help you out. Boy, another little steep section here. Going down to this creek. Yeah, the last part of these, the last part of this trail is a little bit sketchy. Okay. It's really not a well-maintained or well-made trail for the last area. Okay. All right. Here's the story. I think I showed you this before. Now we're going to do a jump across it. That's about a foot and down. So let's see what happens. I'm going to give you the vertical so it's not as shaky. We go across step. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, look at that. I'm a ninja. Celebrate and fall on your face, right? Okay. So I think there's a possibility for kind of sustainable farming, if you will. And if this ends up being a thing, I'll let you guys know how this goes out. We'll see. Okay. So there was one subject I wanted to touch on, and I didn't want to get into it because I hate throwing together, quote unquote bad subjects after another, or fear subjects. Because fear is a real hard thing to deal with in today's culture and fight. And I think part of it is information overload. Fear. So, what is fear and what's its purpose? I've heard it said, and I think this is correct, that fear is there to, now is this bad? I want to quantify that too. This might be just a good thing to talk. Dialogues are good. This helps us get past this. But fear is something that it's instinctual. And because it's instinctual, I think it causes instinctual reactions to occur from it. And all of these things are, I don't know, I would guess maybe this could have something to do with kind of DNA, like how we used to survive as cavemen or some shit. Whether that kind of stuff, instincts can be passed down, hard to say. I would say that there's probably just as much for it as there is against it. But nonetheless, we definitely know fear's a thing and instincts are a thing. And I think if you run too much off instincts or too much on fear, while it's good to pay attention to them because they're there for a reason, it's not good for anything to run your life. And so if you have the time to consider something, much better do it. Obviously, if you're out in the middle of the road and a car's running at you and your instinct is to jump the hell out of the way, you better freaking do it, right? Bears running at you, or maybe that's a bad idea, but you got something, some fear will keep you alive. Hey, that log with that rope looks scary. Don't go across it because you're clumsy as hell. Well, maybe better that you didn't. You just wade through the stream. But yeah, fear. I think fear is there to get you to do something, but to go along with fear, hey, I've just noticed that you guys are looking up at the trees. But to go along with fear, there's something that people I don't think do a good job of, and that's understanding risk. And it's really interesting. You look at, and risk and fear is not the same for each person. And I think this is a very key thing that all sides need to keep this in mind. It's not the same, and it has there's different levels of it. For example, I'm gonna say, here's a great example. So my wife went through the Vietnam War. She was from Cambodia, so she was part of the whole Pol Pot thing. And most people don't realize, but Pol Pot actually killed 25% of their population. 1 out of 4 people. That's just crazy when you think about it. I mean, and I'm not trying to minimize Holocaust or anything, but that's, as far as percentage basis, it's not the same amount of people, which is horrid. But it's definitely close to the same percentage, if not more. So, she went through this situation where there was terrible atrocities that were taking place on this. And I'm not even going to call it a genocide, because this is another thing. It's really interesting. It just dawned on me. It's a similar kind of a thing. It's just a different. It's another 2 groups of people. One which is more old school, and one which is kind of new school. Both have the same religions. Both are the same people. I mean, genealogically. But there's a big difference. Duck a log. I don't remember this on the way in. I'm sure I had to. Yeah, so anyways, she talks about going through war and not having food and water and drinking water out of a puddle when she found it. And one of the most, I'm digressing a little bit from fear, but one of the greatest stories, and I'm still tearing up just thinking about it, not just because it's my wife, but because of all the different people who've gone through this, is she told me a story about when she was little. And so she was probably 5 years old when they left. I'm going to digress away and talk about this just for a bit, because I kind of think this is a cool story, or an interesting story. But it's also about me and about my family and wife. So my father-in-law was a doctor, acupuncturist, and trained in medicine. And so the war's going on, the whole Pol Pot thing's going on. It's gaining power, and people are coming to see him, and as a doctor, he's sought after. So he doesn't feel he has much to, because his job's in demand, and people need healing. He feels like him and his family are safe in this war, or in this uprising. But at that time was an uprising. And a little bit of very small amount of background as I understand it. So this Pol Pot guy, he was very frustrated with the current monarchy in Cambodia at the time. They were going through westernization, where the monarchy loved Elvis and loved the dancing and music of the Western nations, and because he loved it, the people saw that, and of course people tend to gravitate towards what their leaders are into. And there was some tried and true that said, this isn't good. There's definitely some problems with how our society is going to be afterwards. I'm not going to say there may be some truth to their statements, but it's just like trying to understand everybody's viewpoints before you, to help you gain kind of vision on what's going on. But anyways, so he thinks his family's safe, and one of the generals of the army came to him because he was a known doctor at the time, and says, yeah, my wife's very sick, gotta come help. So he goes and finds his wife, and ultimately found out that his wife had a stillborn that had become infectious inside of her, and she was obviously not going to make it because it wasn't coming out. So he performed the procedure and saved her life. 3 days later, General comes back, says to him, your family's on the list. You got to get out. You got to leave now. So this list, so Pol Pot, basically, I kind of skipped over something. So the king's becoming, the Western culture is starting to descend upon Cambodia, basically, and Pol Pot doesn't like it because of some of the let's call it baggage that comes along with it, with Western culture. So he says the problem here are all these educated people that communicate globally and bring in these cultures we don't like. So he pinned education as the problem. So if you were educated and literate, you're a problem, and basically you need to be eradicated. And that's what this list was. It was very similar to how the Nazis thought about Jewish people. And so same thing, list is created, you get put on, anytime a list is created, lists are fucking dangerous. You should never have a list around your group. Be scared of that shit. Pardon my language. Anyways, so he delivers as thankfulness for saving his wife's life, he lets him know that his family's on the list. So they immediately start packing and figure out how they're going to leave. So it was him and his wife, and my wife at the time, his daughter, was 5 years old. Her older brother is a couple years older. And they had an infant 3-month-old baby. Very young. So the first thing was, this baby's not going to make the trip. I would much rather my baby survive here than make the trip and have to die in our arms on the way. So they make the tough decision to give up the baby and give it to a family friend. So they're prepping for 2 days, getting ready for their trip. They're trying to liquidate everything they can. Obviously, they're only getting pennies on the dollar for it. I mean, this is what I imagine what Japanese Americans went through after World War II as well. So trying to liquidate things in a hurry. And they liquidate everything, and they're just getting ready to leave. And, they've hired what's the equivalent, I guess, of a coyote at the time. That's somebody that goes and you pay them to see you safely across borders, basically. This happens all the time here in the States with people trying to get out of Mexico and make it across the southern border into the States. They hire somebody called a coyote. And it's terrible stuff. But so they hire a coyote, and just as they're about to leave, here comes this family back with the baby girl, their little sister. And this baby just won't stop crying, won't stop crying. You got to take her back. We can't take her. We can't take her. So reluctantly they take her back because they realize now that they don't have a good place for her, that they have to make it as a family, and they have to figure out how to, you know, make it through these harsh lands when they may have to be quiet and keep a baby quiet. I mean, this is stuff that I know is not, that's a frequent problem for families fleeing violence and war violence. So they start escaping, and they're going along through the trails, and I don't know how long it had been, or after a week, or what it might be, but pause for a little bit. Oh, have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, so they pause for a little. Excuse me. They're traveling for a little bit, probably a week or so, and they wake up one morning, and their coyote, their guide, is gone, along with the money they paid him. Right. So, and this is a group. There's several people, several families in there. So, very similar to, you know, what's done today, like with the coyotes on the southern border. So, same kind of problem. So now they have to make the choice. Now what do we do? They have a general idea of where they're walking, and they kind of know what's going on. And they continue on their trek as a group, but now they realize they don't have any knowledge of the land that they're going through. So to go through this, so they're going through this land without the knowledge of where they're going. And they said, we got to figure out how to protect ourselves, because pirates are a very real problem. There's always somebody that's going to prey on the vulnerable. And hello, great day. So they had a bright idea. So the mom, they did have still a couple pieces of jewelry left, a wedding ring and things like this, because that's what pirates are going after, things like that. So they took, so mom took her jewelry, and it was, let me back up. I'm going to back up just a little bit to what this is like. So we now have mom and dad carrying food and possessions. We've got my wife, who's a 5-year-old little girl, and I can only picture this because 5-year-old little girls are not quiet. They complain a lot. And then you got the brother that's a little bit older, who's probably 7 or 8. And the jobs are, the brother's carrying water, the water needed for the family. The mom and dad are carrying supplies and other things needed. And my wife has her sister, the little infant, on her back. And so they're trudging out of this. And of course she's complaining the whole way. And causing, you know, all kinds of, not mischief, but just, it's an unpleasant situation. Hi, how you guys doing? And so I remember my wife telling me about, at one point, she's like, this baby's too heavy. My sister's too heavy. Paul, older brother, you take her. So they trade for a little bit, and she's now trying to lug the water, and that's even worse. So that doesn't work out too long. It ends up going back. But this whole thing, oh yeah. So the coyote leaves, and they basically, there's 3 people, and they're traveling in a group. there's 3 kids, 2 adults, and everybody's carrying something, and they have to deal with pirates. So how do you deal with pirates? Number one, you gotta hide valuables. So mom takes her wedding ring and says to May, my wife, put it under your tongue, right? So she hides the wedding ring under their tongue whenever they meet people. She takes my wife's hair at the time, even though she was 5 years old. She had long hair, and took a rock and cut it short. And of course, my wife wasn't liking that at all at the time, really angry. But basically, trying to disguise her as a little boy, right? Sick thing, but little girls are a target. So the foresight to do that, they took some jewelry, like necklaces, like gold chain, and hide it in their hair. And then proceeded to find cow manure, kind of smear it all over themselves, make themselves stinky and undesirable, right? Because the pirates would put up checkpoints and molest and rob everybody that came through. So there was stories about, May remembers being in one of these checkpoints and one of the older girls being drug off into the woods, hearing screams and then gunshots, and the girl not coming back out. So this was a very real problem. And she also remembers ditches and filled with bodies, people with missing limbs from fresh landmines and stuff. And the doctor, her dad, would stop and help when he could, even though he really didn't have supplies. He could do some rudimentary stuff. She remembers him using maggots, exactly, to eat dead flesh, to decrease sepsis and rotting. But anyways, so eventually they make it out through, she remembers them staying in a temple one time, so something like Simrip, Angkor Wat. That's the Tomb Raider kind of stuff. And then they get to Thailand, and it's like it's a concentration camp. You got a giant barbed wire fence. You've got a bunch of people stacked up there, and then you've got a small hut, shack that they stay in, which is basically a slum house. And they give them food. Now, that's a relative term, but basically the food that they give them is just one coconut. So if you take like a coconut and crack it in half, you got like half a coconut. It's about that, barely fits in your hand. And they would give them one coconut of congee. And all congee is it's like boiled rice. So basically it's a rice porridge. Hello.
Hi.
So that was the subsistence that each person would get a day, would be this one coconut of rice porridge, which is, hardly anything. But so one of the happy parts of this whole story, and I'm going to go on with this whole thing about how they made it to the U.S., but one of the happy parts of the story was, before they got into Thailand, there were still some American GIs that had made it into parts of Cambodia. I know we were supposed to only be in Vietnam, but they would be in Cambodia as well. And my wife was drinking from a puddle at the time because they were thirsty, right? Probably made it through all their water supplies, didn't have any. And one of the American GIs, and And her dad warned her, don't go talk to anybody. You go talk to the Americans. You know, there's no good of talking to anybody, because you go and talk to the Khmer Rouge, and then you'd get tortured by the other side thinking you were with the Khmer Rouge. You go talk to the Americans, then you get tortured by the Khmer Rouge trying to get information thinking you're with them. So civilians are always trapped in the middle of the war. But this GI happened to see her drinking from a puddle, and he stopped, and he had an orange soda, like a Fanta. And he popped the cap off, and this was my wife's first time she had ever had soda pop, carbonated drink. And she remembers, it just brings a tear to my eye thinking about this. It's all I can do to keep from sobbing. But the joy that she said that she felt at that moment, of that effervescence from the water going up her nose, and this exhilarating feeling, and how wonderful this sugary drink was, because she had never had anything like that, and it had been such a hard existence for several months while they're walking out and trying to get to Thailand. And then this one American GI offers up this drink in such probably a relatively small, trivial thing, but made such a big deal to her and impacts her yet today. She still talks. She often posts on her social media pages. When Veterans Day, here in the U.S., we celebrate something called Veterans Day. And she says that this was her experience, and that even though when the veterans came back from Vietnam, they were ridiculed, not treated with respect, or not necessarily respect, but they felt that they were not needed and that they weren't doing any good. But for her, that made all the difference in the world. And she's in nursing now, and she's made many friends, and she thinks she said that she's put a lot of veterans who were always haunted by the war, give them some light and some thanks for that. And she thinks that helps them quite a bit. But yeah, so anyways, so they got into, going back to the concentration camp in Thailand. So, hello.
But you could still.
So in this concentration camp, they were only given, one little tiny half a coconut of congee a day, of boiled rice, and there was no protein at all, because that would be too expensive to put forth on refugees, quite frankly. Human life doesn't mean a lot at this time in Southeast Asia. And so, word started going around that there was a doctor in the camp, meaning my father-in-law. And the people didn't have much. But, like with anything, even in a prison system, right, you scrape things together and you start bartering because it becomes so valuable. And so he would start selling his services, doing doctor things, rudimentary kind of stuff. And he was an acupuncturist by trade. So I don't know if he, faked together some piano wire or something, or what he figured out how to do. But people would start coming to him to get treated, and they would give whatever they could. And it got outside the camp that there was this doctor in this refugee camp in Thailand that was helping people and healing people. And so there was now people outside in Thailand, they would hear about it and say, hey, we want this doctor to come help us. And they would buy the supplies for him so that he could treat them better at outside. And so they would, the camp officials reluctantly agreed to let him out of the camp to go treat. But, and then generally he would get fed, but he would negotiate to bring his kids along. And they would never let the whole family go because they didn't want the family to escape. The officials in Thailand didn't want them to escape out, and they weren't trying to encourage people to come to their country, basically. And so they, he would sneak out 1 or 2 kids at a time, and then he would tell them, eat all meat, eat meat, eat meat, and then they'd also, what they could sneak back in their pockets and put in their pockets, they'd take back to camp to mom so that she could have some protein as well. And eventually, this went on. I want to say, my guess is they were probably in this camp somewhere between 2 and 5 months. And eventually a church and a part of a church and a couple other community members of Bainbridge Island decided to sponsor some families out of this camp to come to the U.S., and that was them. And so then they made it to the U.S. And May talks about that being her first time in a plane and her first time in a car, and quite a trip, which I thought was kind of interesting. And so anyways, they really hadn't had experience with a lot of they hadn't had an experience with Western culture and Western conveniences. And so they finally make it, and they fly out to Bainbridge Island. And my wife remembers getting car sick in the car, like never being in a car before and getting motion sick, which is a terrible thing too. And the climate here is much colder than the temperate forests of the jungles of Cambodia. And they get here, and there was a house, and then right next to it was one of those old metal, I don't know if you remember in the 70s, they had these old metal sheds. They were often rusted out, and they were just kind of like garden sheds. And so they get out and they see that thing, and immediately she says that their whole family's heart sank, and that oh, we're going to live in another metal shed, and now it's cold out. Thinking that it was a worse situation that they had back in Thailand. But obviously, the good news was the house was for them. The garden shed just happened to be there. And so they had this house that they were living in, and they were, were talking in their dialect of Chachanese, amongst each other, like, oh no, we're going to live in another shed. And the dad said, well, let's just wait and see how it goes, and we'll make the best of this situation too. And so eventually they find out that, of course, they weren't living in the shed. They were living in the house, and the shed was just with the property that the sponsoring group had rented for the family. And so they kind of spent their first night there. And here's where the story takes kind of a funny turn. It happened to be, they got out on October 31st. And of course, for us here in the States, that's Halloween. And Halloween is a day where all the kids dress up and ring the doorbell and trick or treat, right? And so the first night comes along the line, and all of a sudden they hear this boom, 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 boom knocking on the door. And they open the door, and trick or treat, a bunch of little monsters standing in front of them. So they all slam the door and go run hide in the bedroom. And then don't get up the rest of the night. Thought that was, retrospect, kind of a funny thing. They laugh about it. But there's other things, challenges with learning about Western life. One was living in the jungle for so long. Using the bathroom, you just go out and pee behind a bush. So after a couple weeks, their sponsors had to come over and say, hey, here's how you use the toilet, because the neighbors were tired of seeing white butts at night, using the bathroom out in the yard. So, interesting things. But yeah, so let's come back around to fear. We were talking about fear. So ultimately, somebody like me, who's been born into a very average middle-class house and basically had no cares or wants for all of my childhood, my fear, my pain, my hardships, they're all relative to that person. And even though my hardships are are trivial compared to what my wife's been through, that doesn't make them any less important. And I think that's the hard thing, that people are always so busy comparing our experience to somebody else's that we miss the point. And that point is truth can mean very different things based on your experience and hardships and what you've gone through. Hello.
Howdy.
And if I think that the biggest thing is tolerance. You need to learn to tolerate things, provided that it doesn't impinge on your own positions. And this is where the COVID thing really takes an interesting gray area. I don't want to talk about this here because I don't think we have enough time. Seeing how long it's taken me just to cover 2 subjects. But I think my most important thing to take away from that I need to take away from this is to be tolerant of other people's positions and the actions, other people's actions, provided that they're not directly influencing / damaging your own family. And it's I think the biggest thing is, even amongst this tolerance, the challenge is we love to tell other people what we should and shouldn't be tolerant of. And I can have viewpoints about certain things, and I got to be careful, because my viewpoints are different from other people's. So just like, there's never a right scenario where I, as a white male, can say the N-word. There's not a, and that's not put on me by myself. That's put on me by society, and I'm okay with that, because I can't relate to the challenges to for example, the black community that went through this. But by the same way, if you see an interaction, and well, I'm having a little bit of a hard time here, but if you see an interaction with somebody else, where should it be your place to intervene in something? And because what might be considered, hey, how you doing? Good morning. What might be considered as a bad interaction or caustic interaction by somebody might not by others. And so at what point you intervene, it's like the whole challenge of if somebody's getting robbed and mugged, do you step in and intervene? And ultimately, most people would say, yeah, absolutely. And I would tend to agree with that you would step in. The challenge is when it becomes more nuanced. Let's say it's a racial slur or fat shaming or something like that. Should you still step in, or at what point do you stop being a police force? And this is, I don't think there is a right answer to this, because it's good for people to learn how to step up for themselves, but maybe you just have to observe the situation and make sure it doesn't get out of hand. Maybe that's the right way to deal with it. But I was thinking with where, like, the Asian side of my family, there's a lot of stuff that's very discriminatory that they have to deal with, and they rather I don't make a big fuss out of it most of the time. Although some of the time I've been caught after the fact and called out for it, quite frankly. My wife called me out for it. Said there was a subject where there was somebody did dumped a Slurpee over my father-in-law's head one time, and he was saying, no, don't make a big deal out of it, and I was oblivious to it. I don't even remember it. I don't feel good about that. But it's a when do you jump in and say something? When do you make it your point? Maybe the thing to do is like with domestic abuse situations where like a police officer will stop and ask somebody, hey, are you okay? Do you need help? They usually have to separate the person because they're afraid of retribution, but maybe something like that. This is just kind of my thoughts. How do we get here? We were talking about in a situation like people have different fear. We're talking about fears, yeah. So fear for everybody's different, and just because somebody's fear might be considered greater when compared to somebody else's, it doesn't make it any less relevant. So I think that's really what I want to say. So people's viewpoints are bought off of fears, and fear is an ability to tolerate risk. And so I think the most important thing that I want to talk about, or that I want to kind of leave, we're getting close to the end, so I'm trying to figure out how to wind this down and leave it at a good stopping point. And I want to, if this continues, if I keep doing this, and I think I will, I really like talking about this, but fear and risk are very different, and that's the ultimate drivers. Risk tolerance, not risk tolerance. Fear and risk tolerance are the most important thing for people, and it drives your reactions and what kind of action you take on something. And you can really see how different groups of people, based on experiences, and this is all like my wife's experience, sets her level of fear. So these experiences, tune your risk tolerance and what's acceptable risk and what's not. So I think this is a super deep subject and a lot more to talk about it. So let's see. On a quick recap, the first part of the day we talked about, the current Ukraine situation. Then we spent some time, we talked a little bit about sustainable farming, specifically chickens. There's more to talk about on that. Very interesting. Now we see the sun out. This is freaking beautiful. I'm loving it. I'm really glad I stepped out and did this. And then we talked about my wife's story, and we talked a little bit about fear and risk, but mostly about my wife's story and leaving Cambodia. So I can now see a house in the distance. That means we're getting back close. And I want to thank you all for joining. And I'm going to give a quick little recap of this, what I thought about this trail now. I think that's a good way to wind this down. So this was very nice. You could obviously see I was the only person on the trail this morning at 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday. It was a little bit foggy out, but it's burnt off now. I got blue sky. Nice weather. It was cold. I've kind of warmed up. I've kept up a brisk pace. And ultimately, if you come out here, you want to come out super early in the morning. Well, I don't know about super early, but I want to say there's kind of limited parking. You might be able to park farther down the road, but you'll have to definitely do some walking to try to get back. And lots of signs here for private property. Oh, another family. Morning. Oh. Morning. Quite a few people now jumping out. Hello.
Hello. Are those people?
Well, there's the main road. So right where that car just turned, I don't know if you can see him in the distance, but that's your best parking. And I'll take a quick shot of all the parking spots or how many people. You can really see how I've been just one person after another in this last bit. The trail's nice. I'm definitely gonna have to come back out here again and explore farther up past the waterfall. That's gonna be a good area to take a look at. But it was real enjoyable walk this morning, at least when there's nobody around. Unfortunately for everybody today. So I'll probably dub over this as well for the people who don't want to hear my constant chatter and diarrhea of the mouth. I'll put some like tranquil meditation music or mood music over the top and let people kind of enjoy the trail without that, especially that in waterfall. Hi.
Hey.
We should go on.
So they got just this to keep people from driving through here. Because it's definitely a road you could drive on. Wow, now look at it. It's really loaded up. It's just shackled. And you can see the lino cars all the way down as far as the eye can see. My car's still here in the front. Very nice having that parking spot. And thank you for joining me today.